Pregnant by my cheating mate, I fled. The Alpha King found me first. Some bonds are meant to break, so others can form. I never believed that until the night I ran, my hand pressed against the small swell of my belly, my wolf whimpering with every step that took me farther from the only pack I'd ever known. The moon was dark that night, as if even Luna herself had turned her face away from what I'd witnessed. But I ran anyway, because staying would have destroyed me more completely than leaving ever could. My name is Sarah Whitlock, and I was nothing special in the Crescent Falls pack. Omega born, my wolf small and gray where others gleamed silver and gold. I'd spent 23 years being grateful for the scraps of belonging I received, never asking for more than I was given. When Garrett Stone, the beta's son, chose me as his mate, I thought the goddess had finally smiled on me. I thought I'd been seen. For 2 years, I wore his mark on my throat and his ring on my finger, and I believed in the forever he'd promised under the mating moon. I believed until I came home early from the healer's clinic, my secret burning bright in my chest. I was carrying his child, our child, the pup I'd dreamed of since the day we'd bonded. I'd imagined his face when I told him, practiced the words a dozen times as I walked through the pack house corridors. The door to our quarters was ajar, and I'd pushed it open with trembling hands, ready to share the news that would change everything. The scent hit me first. Her scent. Lilac and vanilla. So different from my own earthy sweetness. Then I heard her laugh. That crystalline sound that belonged to Amber Frost, the Alpha's daughter, the she-wolf every male in the pack desired. And I heard Garrett's groan, deep and satisfied, the sound he'd only ever made with me in our most intimate moments. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, as I watched my mate move over her, his hands tangled in her golden hair, his mouth worshipping her skin the way he'd once worshipped mine. The bond in my chest twisted like a knife, sharp and merciless, confirming what my eyes showed me. He was choosing her. He'd been choosing her for months, the bond whispered. Every late night, every distant look, every time he'd turned away from my touch, he'd been with her. Amber's eyes met mine over his shoulder, and she smiled. Not a guilty smile or an apologetic one. A victorious smile, as if she'd won a prize she'd been competing for. As if I'd never mattered at all. Garrett didn't even notice I was there until I gasped, the sound torn from my throat like a wounded animal's cry. He turned, and for a moment, I saw guilt flicker across his face. But then his jaw hardened, and he didn't move away from her. Didn't cover her. Didn't reach for me. Sarah, he said, my name flat in his mouth. We need to talk. Those 4 words shattered something in me that had already been cracking. I ran. I didn't wait for his explanations or her smug satisfaction. I ran through the pack house, past wolves who turned to stare, their noses twitching as they scented my distress. I ran to the quarters we'd shared, threw what I could into a backpack. Clothes, the emergency cash I'd been saving, the journal where I'd written our story. I left his ring on the dresser beside a note with only 3 words. I know everything. Then I ran from the pack house, through the territory I'd called home, across the boundary markers that had always kept me safe. I ran into rogue territory, where unmated wolves without packs wandered, where danger lurked in every shadow. I ran because staying would mean watching him choose her publicly, watching my pup grow up knowing their father had thrown us away for someone more worthy. My wolf howled inside me, mourning the bond even as she urged me forward. Safety lay ahead somewhere. It had to. The human town of Millbrook Ridge hugged the base of the northern mountains, far enough from Crescent Falls that Garrett wouldn't immediately think to look for me there. I'd been running for 3 days, sleeping in abandoned cabins and drinking from streams, my wolf form better suited to the journey than my fragile human body. But I couldn't stay shifted forever. Not with the pup growing inside me, needing stability and safety that only my human form could provide in civilization. I shifted in the woods outside town, pulled on my least dirty clothes, and walked into Millbrook with my head down and my scent carefully masked with the mud I'd rolled in. Human towns were neutral territory, places where the supernatural world and the mundane one brushed against each other with careful ignorance. Humans didn't ask too many questions if you had cash and kept to yourself. I found a room in a boarding house run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who barely looked at me before taking my money and handing me a key. The room was small, just a bed and a dresser and a bathroom down the hall, but it was mine. I locked the door and collapsed onto the mattress, my hand sliding to my belly where my pup, rested safe and unaware. Tears came then, hot and bitter, for everything I'd lost and everything I'd never really had. Garrett hadn't just betrayed me. He'd made me a rogue, a wolf without a pack, one of the most dangerous things a shifter could become. Rogues went mad eventually, their wolves consuming them without the anchor of pack bonds to keep them sane. But I couldn't go back. I wouldn't raise my child in a pack where their father had publicly chosen another mate, where I'd be pitied or scorned, where my pup would always be the reminder of their father's shame. I had maybe 3 months before pack instincts would begin tearing at my sanity. 3 months to figure out how to survive as a lone wolf with a pup on the way. The baby's father would never know they existed. That truth sat heavy and hard in my chest, but it was the right choice. My pup deserved better than a father who would abandon them before they were even born. Morning came too bright through the thin curtains, and I forced myself up, forced myself to think practically. I needed money, needed to strengthen what little resources I had before the pregnancy progressed further. Millbrook was a logging town, and the diner on Main Street had a help wanted sign in the window. I could waitress. I'd done it before, back when I was younger, before Garrett had insisted I work only within pack territory. I washed as best I could in the shared bathroom, braided my dark hair, and walked into that diner like I belonged there, like I wasn't a creature falling apart inside. The owner was a gruff man named Tom who looked me over once and asked if I could start that afternoon. No questions about where I came from or why I was alone. Just a nod when I said yes, and a simple uniform thrust into my hands. The work was hard, my feet aching after the first hour, the scents from the kitchen sometimes making my stomach turn as morning sickness crept up on me. But I smiled at customers and poured coffee, and pretended I was just another human girl trying to make rent. The other waitress, a woman named Donna with kind eyes and too many questions, tried to befriend me during breaks. I kept my answers vague, and she eventually stopped pushing, though I sometimes caught her watching me with concern that made my throat tight. Days blurred into a week, then 2. I worked, slept, and rationed my money carefully. The pup grew, my belly beginning to show enough that I wore baggier shirts to hide it. Mrs. Chen never came around, and I paid rent through a slot in her door, grateful for the anonymity. At night, I lay in bed and talked to the pup, whispered promises that I'd keep them safe, that they'd never feel unwanted or unloved, that I'd be enough for both of us. My wolf was quieter than she'd been in pack territory, subdued by the absence of others like us, but she stirred whenever I touched my belly, protective and fierce. We were surviving, if not thriving. It was more than I'd hoped for when I'd fled. What do you think Sarah should do next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of her journey. The Alpha King was a legend, a story told to pups to make them behave, or to inspire awe in young wolves coming of age. His name was Thorn Blackwood, and he ruled the largest pack in North America. Some said the world, from a territory that stretched across 3 states. He was ancient by shifter standards, over 200 years old, though he looked no more than 30 in human years. They said he'd never taken a mate, that he was too powerful, too dominant for any she-wolf to match. They said he was merciless with rogues and traitors, that his justice was swift and absolute. They said he could shift faster than thought, that his wolf was massive and black as midnight with eyes like molten gold. Every pack feared and respected him in equal measure. The Crescent Falls pack lived at the very edge of his territory, far enough away that we rarely saw his enforcers, but close enough that we paid tribute twice a year and followed his laws without question. I never imagined I'd meet him. Never imagined he'd have any reason to notice an Omega Wolf like me. But fate, I was learning, had a cruel sense of humor. It was a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I'd fled, when everything changed. I was working the breakfast shift, moving between tables with a pot of coffee, my body tired but functional. The bell above the diner door chimed, and I glanced up out of habit, already reaching for a menu. The man who walked in stole the breath from my lungs and made my wolf surge to attention so fast I nearly dropped the coffee pot. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders that filled the doorway and a presence that seemed to make the air itself bend around him. His hair was black and slightly too long, brushing his collar, and his face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty. High cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Gold. Pure molten gold, burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through skin and bone to the soul underneath. Power radiated from him like heat, the kind of power that made my wolf want to simultaneously bare her throat in submission and press closer in fascination. He was Shifter, Alpha, and something more. Something my instincts recognized even as my mind struggled to process it. 2 men flanked him, both clearly enforcers, broad and watchful, their eyes scanning the diner like they expected threats to emerge from behind the napkin dispensers. But the man in the center paid them no attention. His gaze had locked onto me the moment he entered, and I felt pinned by it, caught like prey in a predator's sight. He moved toward me with fluid grace, each step deliberate and controlled, and I couldn't move. Couldn't look away, couldn't do anything but stand there clutching my coffee pot like a lifeline. When he stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell him, pine and snow and something wild and ancient, I tilted my head back to meet his eyes and felt the world shift beneath my feet. "You're in distress," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel wrapped in silk. Not a question, a statement. My hand flew to my belly instinctively, protectively, and his gaze followed the movement. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw something flash through them. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "You're pregnant," he said, his voice softer now, and I realized with creeping horror that he could scent it, could scent everything about me despite my attempts to mask myself. "And you're unmated." The way he said it carried weight, condemnation, and I felt tears prick my eyes even as I lifted my chin. "That's none of your business," I whispered, my voice shaking but defiant. "I'm just here to work." Something flickered across his face, an expression I couldn't read, and then one of his enforcers leaned in and murmured something I couldn't hear. The Alpha's expression hardened into something dangerous and cold. "You're from Crescent Falls," he said, and it wasn't a question. My scent, beneath the mud and the human smells I'd layered on, must have still carried traces of my old pack. "You're a rogue." The word fell between us like a death sentence, and I felt the diner go quiet around us, humans sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. "I left my pack," I said, my voice barely audible. "I'm not causing trouble. I'm just trying to survive." His eyes bored into mine, searching for something, and I couldn't look away, couldn't hide from whatever he saw in me. Fear, yes, but also determination and a fierce protective love for the life growing inside me. Please, I whispered, hating how the words sounded like begging. I'm not hurting anyone. I just need to be left alone. For a long moment he said nothing, and I wondered if this was where it ended. If he'd drag me before pack justice and execute me for the crime of leaving without permission, or worse, send me back to Garrett and the pack that had broken me. Then he did something I didn't expect. He reached out slowly, giving me time to flinch away if I wanted, and his hand, large and warm and surprisingly gentle, settled on my shoulder. The touch sent electricity racing down my spine, my wolf practically purring at the contact even as my human mind screamed warnings. "You will come with me," he said, and my heart stopped. "You're under my protection now. No one will harm you or your pup." I stared at him, unable to process the words. Protection? From the Alpha King? I don't understand, I breathed. His thumb brushed against my collarbone, a touch so tender it made my eyes sting. "You will," he said simply. Then he looked at his enforcers. "Pay for her meals. Settle her debts. We leave in 10 minutes. I should have argued, should have demanded explanations or refused to go with a stranger, even one who radiated safety in a way that made my wolf whine with longing. But I was so tired of being alone, so tired of carrying this weight by myself, and something in his eyes promised that he meant what he said. Protection. Safety. For me and my pup. So I nodded, mute and overwhelmed, and watched as he moved to sit at a corner booth, his eyes never leaving me as I mechanically finished my shift. Donna stared at me with wide eyes, clearly sensing something momentous had happened, but I couldn't explain it to her when I didn't understand it myself. 10 minutes later, I walked out of that diner with nothing but the backpack I'd brought from my room, following the most powerful alpha in the territory into an SUV with tinted windows. As we pulled away from Millbrook, I pressed my hand to my belly and wondered if I'd made the best decision of my life or the worst. The drive to Blackwood Territory took 4 hours, winding through mountains and forests that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. I sat in the back seat, Thorn beside me, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. He didn't speak for the first hour, and neither did I, both of us lost in our own thoughts. His enforcers, Marcus and Liam, I learned, drove and navigated, their occasional conversation a low murmur that didn't require our participation. I watched the landscape pass and tried not to think about what I was doing, following a stranger to his territory, trusting a man I'd met an hour ago with my life and my pup's life. But my wolf was calm for the first time since I'd fled Crescent Falls, settled and secure in a way that defied logic. She trusted him. And some deep instinct in me, older than thought or reason, trusted him too. "Tell me what happened," Thorn said finally, his voice quiet enough that it was clearly meant only for me. I turned to look at him and found him watching me with those impossible gold eyes, patient and expectant. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I don't want to talk about it," I whispered. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze softened. "You fled your pack while pregnant," he said gently. "That's not a choice made lightly. You're scared, injured in ways that have nothing to do with your body. Someone hurt you." The accuracy of his assessment made my eyes burn with unshed tears. I looked away, out the window, blinking rapidly. "My mate," I said, the word bitter on my tongue. "I found him with the Alpha's daughter. They'd been together for months, and I never knew. I was nothing to him. Less than nothing." My voice broke on the last words, and I pressed my lips together hard, refusing to cry in front of this man who'd shown me more care in an hour than Garrett had in months. "He didn't want the pup?" Thorn asked, his voice carefully neutral, but I heard the edge beneath it, something dangerous and protective. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. He doesn't know about the pup. I left before I could tell him. He made his choice clear when I walked in on them. My child won't grow up with a father who sees them as an obligation or a mistake. Thorn was silent for a long moment, and when I dared to glance at him, his expression was thunderous, rage simmering beneath the surface of his control. "He's a fool," he said finally, each word precise and sharp. "And he'll answer for the dishonor he's brought to the sacred bond." I shook my head quickly. "No, please. I don't want revenge or justice or whatever you're thinking. I just want to move forward, to build a life for my pup where they're loved and safe. That's all I want." His hand moved, and I tensed, but he only brushed his fingers against mine where they rested on my knee, a touch so gentle it made my breath catch. "Then that's what you'll have," he said, his voice a promise. "In my territory, under my protection, you and your pup will have everything you need to thrive." I wanted to ask why. Why would the Alpha King care about one broken Omega and her fatherless pup? What did he gain from this? But the question stuck in my throat, held back by the fear that if I questioned too hard, he might realize I wasn't worth the trouble and change his mind. So I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you," and let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe the goddess hadn't abandoned me after all. Maybe she'd just been waiting to introduce me to the right wolf, the one who would catch me when I fell. The rest of the drive passed in silence, but it was a comfortable one, and when Thorn's hand settled over mine, warm and steady, I didn't pull away. My wolf hummed with contentment, and I let myself relax for the first time in weeks, watching the road ahead and wondering what waited for me in Blackwood territory. The Blackwood packlands were nothing like Crescent Falls. Where my old pack had been comfortable and modest, this territory was magnificent. Sprawling forests dotted with cabins and homes, a central compound that looked more like a small village than a pack house, training grounds and gardens and open spaces where wolves could run free. The pack house itself was a massive lodge built from timber and stone, 3 stories high with wide windows that caught the afternoon light and made the whole structure glow like something out of a dream. Wolves moved through the grounds, some in human form and some shifted, all of them radiating the kind of health and confidence that came from being part of a strong, stable pack. I felt my inadequacy settle over me like a cloak as we pulled up to the main entrance. I was Omega-born, rogued, pregnant, and unmated. What was I doing here among these powerful, perfect wolves? Thorn must have sensed my spiral because his hand squeezed mine gently. "Breathe," he said, his voice low. "You belong here now. No one will challenge that." I wanted to believe him, but years of being lesser, of being barely tolerated, were hard to overcome with just words. Still, I nodded and let him help me out of the SUV, his hand steady on my elbow as we climbed the steps to the entrance. Wolves stopped to stare as we passed, their eyes widening when they saw their Alpha King escorting a strange she-wolf with clear deference. I heard murmurs, questions, but Thorn ignored them all, guiding me through corridors lined with photographs and pack history until we reached a suite of rooms on the 3rd floor. "These are yours," he said, opening the door to reveal a spacious apartment, a bedroom with a massive bed, a sitting area with comfortable furniture, a bathroom with a deep tub, and a smaller room that was clearly meant to be a nursery. My throat closed at the sight of it, at the thoughtfulness implicit in the choice. "I don't understand," I whispered, turning to face him. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know. Me? You don't owe me anything." His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "I know more than you think," he said cryptically. "Rest now." Dinner will be brought to you. Tomorrow, we'll talk more. He turned to leave, and panic flared in my chest at the thought of being alone again. Thorn, I said, his name foreign and intimate on my tongue. He paused, looking back. Will you tell me why? Eventually? Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability I hadn't expected from someone so powerful. Yes, he said softly, when you're ready to hear it. The door closed behind him, and I stood in the center of the beautiful rooms, my hand on my belly, and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. This morning, I'd been a rogue waitress in a human town, alone and terrified. Tonight, I was in the Alpha King's territory, under his protection, surrounded by comfort and safety I hadn't dared hope for. My wolf was practically singing with satisfaction, more settled than she'd been since we'd fled, but my human mind churned with questions and doubts. What did Thorn want from me? What would happen when my pup was born? Could I really stay here? Or was this temporary kindness that would evaporate when he realized I was nothing special? I moved to the window and looked out over the packlands, watching wolves move through the grounds in the golden afternoon light. Children played near one of the cabins, their laughter carrying on the breeze, and I felt my pup kick for the first time, a flutter so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. My hand pressed against the movement, tears streaming down my face. We're going to be okay, I whispered to them. I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay. And standing there in that beautiful room, with the sunset painting the mountains gold and the sound of a healthy pack all around me, I almost believed it. Don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me if you think Sarah can really trust the Alpha King, or if there's more to his story than he's letting on. The days that followed settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Thorn kept his distance physically, but his presence was constant in other ways. Meals appeared at my door 3 times a day, always with foods that settled my morning sickness, always in portions that seemed calibrated to what I needed. A healer named Dr. Rivera came to examine me and the pup, declaring us both healthy but recommending rest and good nutrition. Clothes appeared in my closet, soft and comfortable things that would accommodate my growing belly. Books materialized on my nightstand, novels and poetry that somehow matched my taste perfectly. It was like being cared for by a ghost, one who knew me better than I knew myself. But I saw him. Every evening as the sun set, Thorn would appear on the grounds beneath my window, his massive black wolf moving through the territory with a grace that stole my breath. Sometimes he'd pause and look up, his gold eyes finding mine through the glass, and we'd stay like that for long moments, connected across the distance. My wolf ached to join him, to run at his side, but I was still too newly rogued, too unstable to shift safely with the pup growing inside me. So I watched, and he watched back, and something built between us in the silence. Something I didn't have words for yet, but felt in every cell of my body. On the 5th day, Thorn knocked on my door just after breakfast. I opened it to find him in human form, dressed simply in dark jeans and a black shirt that stretched across his shoulders in a way that made my mouth go dry. "Walk with me," he said, not quite a question, but not a command either. I nodded and followed him out, down the stairs and through the pack house, acutely aware of the wolves who stopped to stare at us. His hand settled on the small of my back as we walked, a possessive gesture that sent whispers rippling through the pack members we passed, and my cheeks burned with confusion and something that might have been hope. He led me to a garden behind the main house, a quiet space filled with flowers and herbs and a small fountain that burbled softly. We sat on a bench beneath a willow tree, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "You have questions," he said finally, his eyes fixed on the fountain. "And I owe you answers." I hugged my arms around myself, suddenly nervous. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my chest since the moment he'd found me. Why would the Alpha King care about one broken Omega who couldn't even keep her mate faithful? His head turned sharply toward me, and the intensity in his eyes made me shrink back. "Don't," he said, his voice hard. "Don't diminish yourself like that. Your mate's failure has nothing to do with your worth." I wanted to believe him, but the wounds were too fresh. "Then why?" I pressed. "You could have left me in that diner. You could have sent me back to Crescent Falls or to any number of packs. Why bring me here? Why give me all of this?" He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion I couldn't name. "Because the moment I walked into that diner and saw you, I knew," he said. "My wolf knew. You're my mate, Sarah. My true mate. The one I've been waiting 2 centuries to find." The world tilted sideways. I stared at him, my mouth open, unable to form words. Mate? His mate? That was impossible. I was already mated to Garrett, his mark still on my throat even if the bond was shattered and broken. And Thorn was the Alpha King, powerful and ancient and perfect. He couldn't be fated to someone like me. "That's impossible," I whispered, echoing my thoughts. "I'm already mated. I bear another wolf's mark." His hand moved to my throat, his fingers tracing the scar where Garrett's mark sat, and I shivered at the touch. "A false mark," he said softly, "given by a wolf who wasn't your true mate. The bond you felt with him was proximity and hope, not fate. But the pull between us, Sarah, tell me you don't feel it. Tell me your wolf doesn't recognize mine." I couldn't tell him that, because it would be a lie. From the moment he'd walked into the diner, something in me had sung with recognition, with rightness. My wolf had been more settled in his presence than she'd ever been with Garrett, even at the height of our bonding. But admitting that felt like a betrayal, like I was giving up on the life I'd thought I'd have, the dreams I'd built with a wolf who'd thrown me away. "I'm pregnant with another wolf's pup," I said desperately. "How can I be your mate when I'm carrying someone else's child?" Thorn's expression softened, and he shifted closer, his hand moving from my throat to cup my cheek. "That pup is innocent of their father's sins," he said gently, "and if you'll have me, if you'll accept this bond, I will raise them as my own. They'll be loved and protected and cherished, just as you will be. I swear it on my life and my honor." Tears spilled down my cheeks, and I couldn't stop them. No one had ever offered me something like this, something so generous and selfless. Garrett had wanted me when I was convenient, when I served his needs. But Thorn was offering to take on not just me, but my child, to accept the complications and the mess and the broken pieces I carried. "Why?" I whispered again, my voice breaking. "Because you're mine," he said simply, "and I protect what's mine. Because I've waited 200 years to find you, and now that I have, I'm not letting you go. Because when I look at you, I see strength and courage, and a fierce love for your pup that makes me want to give you the world." His thumb brushed away my tears. "You don't have to accept the bond now. I know you're healing from deep wounds, but know that my claim on you is absolute, and no one, not your former mate, not anyone, will ever hurt you again." I searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motives, but found only sincerity and a raw hunger that made my breath catch. My wolf was howling inside me, desperate to accept him, to let him mark us properly and complete the true bond. But my human mind held back, scared and scarred and uncertain. "I need time," I whispered. "I need to process this, to understand what it means." He nodded, though I saw disappointment flicker through his eyes. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I've waited centuries. I can wait longer. But Sarah, know this. Whether you accept the bond or not, you and your pup are mine to protect. That doesn't change." He stood, offering me his hand, and I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. We walked back to the pack house in silence, but his hand stayed in mine, warm and solid, and I felt something shift in my chest, some small crack in the walls I'd built around my heart. That night, as I lay in bed with my hand on my growing belly, I talked to my pup about their future. "Your father doesn't know you exist," I whispered in the darkness. "And maybe that's for the best, because I think the goddess has given us something better. A wolf who wants us, who sees us, who's offering us a home and a family, and a love I never thought I'd find." The pup kicked, stronger now, and I smiled through fresh tears. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared to trust again, scared to believe this is real. But maybe that's what courage is, being scared and choosing to hope anyway." And lying there in the safety of Blackwood territory, with the Alpha King's protection wrapped around me like a blanket, I let myself hope for the first time since I'd fled Crescent Falls. The weeks that followed were a dance of careful proximity and growing trust. Thorn didn't push, didn't demand, didn't crowd me, but he was there, sitting across from me at meals in the main dining hall, teaching me about pack politics and territory management, introducing me to key pack members with a possessiveness that made his intentions clear to everyone watching. The pack's initial suspicion of me faded as they saw their alpha's devotion, replaced by cautious acceptance and then genuine welcome. Children approached me in the gardens asking to feel the pup kick, and their mothers offered advice and friendship that I accepted with gratitude. I was becoming part of something larger than myself, woven into the fabric of Blackwood Pack in ways that felt both terrifying and wonderful. Dr. Rivera became a regular presence, monitoring my pregnancy with the kind of thorough care I'd never received at Crescent Falls. "Your pup is strong," she told me during one appointment, her warm smile easing my constant worry. "Healthy heartbeat, good growth, no complications. You're doing everything right, Sarah." Those words meant more than she could know, validation that despite everything, I was capable of being a good mother. Thorn attended every appointment, sitting quietly in the corner unless I invited him closer, his presence a silent source of strength. He asked intelligent questions, took notes on things I needed to remember, and always made sure I felt safe and supported. One afternoon, 6 weeks after I'd arrived, Thorn found me in the nursery, standing in front of the empty crib that had been placed there. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly from the doorway. I turned to face him, my hand on my belly where the pup was particularly active today. "No," I said honestly, "just wondering what kind of life I can give them. I'm Omega-born, rogued, with no pack name to pass on. What kind of legacy is that?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands settling on my shoulders, his eyes burning into mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. "You're giving them survival," he said fiercely. "Courage, the knowledge that love is a choice, not an obligation. You fled a bad situation to protect them. You're building a new life from nothing. That's a legacy to be proud of." His words cracked something open inside me, some last resistance I'd been clinging to. "Thorn," I whispered, his name a prayer and a question. "I'm scared of this, of us, of what it means to accept you as my true mate." His hands moved to cup my face, gentle despite the power I knew he wielded. "I know," he said softly, "and I would never force you. But Sarah, let me ask you something. When you think about the future, about raising your pup, do you see yourself alone? Or do you see me there beside you?" I closed my eyes, and the image that appeared was achingly clear. Thorn holding my pup, his eyes soft with love. The 3 of us, a family. When I opened them again, tears were streaming down my face. "I see you," I admitted, my voice breaking. I see us, but I'm so scared of being hurt again, of trusting and having it torn away. I can't promise I'll be perfect, Thorn said, his thumbs brushing away my tears. I'll make mistakes, disappoint you sometimes, fail to understand what you need. But I can promise I'll never betray you, never abandon you, never make you feel like you're not enough. You and your pup will always be my priority, my treasure, my reason for everything. The sincerity in his voice, the rawness of his confession, broke down the last of my walls. I want to try, I whispered. I want to accept the bond. But I need to do one thing first. He nodded, waiting, patient as ever. I need you to remove Garrett's mark, I said, my hand moving to my throat. I need to be free of him completely before I can be truly yours. Understanding flickered through Thorn's eyes, followed by something darker and more possessive. Removing another wolf's mark is painful, he warned. It will hurt, and it will sever whatever remains of that false bond. I lifted my chin, my jaw set. Good, I said firmly. He deserves no claim on me, not anymore. Thorn studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Tonight, he said, under the full moon, I'll do it properly with the pack as witness so no one can ever question your freedom or your choice to be mine. The promise in his words sent heat rushing through me, and for the first time since fleeing Crescent Falls, I felt like I was moving forward rather than just surviving. Tonight, I would be free, and tomorrow, I would choose my true mate. What do you think will happen when Garrett finds out? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the ceremony. The pack gathered under the full moon, forming a circle in the central clearing where rituals and ceremonies had been held for generations. Torches burned at intervals around the perimeter, casting dancing shadows on the assembled wolves, and the air hummed with power and anticipation. I stood at the center beside Thorn, my hand clasped in his, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wore a simple white dress that one of the pack women had given me, the fabric soft against my skin and loose enough to accommodate my growing belly. My hair hung loose down my back, and I'd left my throat bare, Garrett's mark visible to everyone who looked. Thorn stood beside me in dark clothing, his presence commanding and absolute, his gold eyes reflecting the moonlight. The pack had assembled quickly when word of the ceremony spread, eager to witness their Alpha King claim his true mate. I saw curiosity in some faces, approval in others, and a few skeptical expressions that I tried not to focus on. Marcus and Liam stood at the edge of the circle, along with Dr. Rivera and several other wolves I'd come to know. They smiled at me encouragingly, and I drew strength from their support. Wolves of Blackwood. Thorn's voice rang out, powerful and clear, demanding attention. The murmurs ceased immediately, every eye turning to us. You know me as your alpha, your leader, your king. For 2 centuries, I have guided this pack, protected you, fought for you. In all that time, I never found the one wolf the goddess created to be my other half. He turned to me, his expression softening. Until 6 weeks ago, when I walked into a human diner and found her serving coffee, pregnant and alone, bearing another wolf's false mark. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd, but Thorn raised his hand and silence fell again. Sarah Whitlock came to us as a rogue, fleeing a mate who betrayed her, carrying a pup whose father threw her away like garbage. His voice hardened on those words, and I heard growls from several pack members, their protective instincts roused. But the moment I saw her, my wolf recognized what my soul had been searching for. My true mate, the Luna, the goddess destined to stand beside me. He turned to address the pack fully. Tonight, I ask you to witness 2 things. First, the removal of the false mark she bears, freeing her completely from the wolf who had no right to claim her. Second, if she will accept me, the formation of our true mate bond. My breath caught as he turned back to me, dropping to one knee before me in front of the entire pack. Gasps echoed around the circle. An alpha king kneeling before an omega was unheard of, a gesture of such profound respect and devotion that several she-wolves pressed their hands to their mouths in shock. Sarah, Thorn said, his voice carrying to every wolf present but somehow intimate, as if we were alone. I offer you my mark, my protection, my pack, my life. I offer to raise your pup as my own heir, to love them and cherish them as I will love and cherish you. I offer you everything I am and everything I have. Will you accept me as your true mate? Tears streamed down my face as I looked at him, this powerful, ancient wolf kneeling before me, offering me the world. Yes, I whispered. Then louder, my voice ringing clear across the clearing. Yes, I accept you, Thorn Blackwood. I accept your mark and your bond. I choose you as my mate. The pack erupted in howls of approval, the sound filling the night sky, and Thorn rose fluidly to his feet, his hands cupping my face with infinite gentleness. The false mark first, he said softly, for my ears only. It will hurt, but I'll be as quick as I can. I nodded, tilting my head to expose my throat, the old mark that had once meant everything to me now, just a scar I was ready to erase. Thorn's eyes shifted, gold bleeding into his irises, and his canines lengthened. He leaned in, his breath warm against my skin, and whispered, "Trust me." Then his teeth sank into the mark, precise and controlled, and white-hot pain exploded through me. I gasped, my hands clutching his shoulders as he worked, his bite carefully positioned to destroy the old mark completely. The false bond, already shattered, screamed as it was torn out at the roots, phantom pain lancing through my chest. But underneath the agony, I felt liberation, chains I hadn't known I was carrying falling away. Thorn's tongue swept over the wound, his saliva carrying healing properties that made the pain recede. And when he pulled back, his mouth was stained with my blood, and his eyes were wild with barely controlled possession. "It's done," he said roughly. "You're free." I touched my throat, feeling the smooth skin where Garrett's mark had been, and let out a sob of relief. Free. I was finally free. The pack had gone silent, watching with bated breath, waiting for what came next. Thorn's eyes held mine, a question in them, and I nodded, tilting my head again in offering. "Mark me," I whispered. "Make me yours." His growl was pure satisfaction, and then his mouth was on my throat again, this time on the other side, his teeth sinking in with perfect precision. This time, there was no pain, only pleasure, sharp and bright and overwhelming, as the true mate bond snapped into place between us. I felt him flood into my consciousness, felt his wolf recognize mine, felt 2 centuries of loneliness and waiting collapse into this single perfect moment. His emotions washed over me, fierce protectiveness, bone-deep satisfaction, a love so vast and consuming it made me dizzy. And underneath it all, I felt something I never had with Garrett, absolute certainty. This was right. This was fate. This was forever. When Thorn pulled back, his mark gleamed silver on my throat, a perfect claiming bite that announced to every wolf who saw it exactly who I belonged to. The pack erupted again, howls of celebration echoing off the mountains, and wolves began shifting, running in joyous circles around the clearing. Thorn pulled me into his arms, careful of my belly, and kissed me for the first time, deep and claiming and tender all at once. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the emotion I'd been holding in for weeks. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "My mate," he murmured, wonder in his voice. Finally. I laughed through my tears. Your mate, I agreed. And your Luna. The pack celebration continued around us, but in that moment it was just the two of us, bound by fate and choice, ready to face whatever came next together. The days after the mating ceremony passed in a haze of happiness I'd never experienced before. The bond between Thorn and me grew stronger every day, a constant warm presence in my mind that I could reach for whenever I wanted reassurance or comfort. He was attentive without being overbearing, giving me space to settle into my new role as his Luna while always being available when I needed him. The pack accepted me fully now, seeing their alpha's devotion and responding with their own loyalty and respect. Children called me Luna Sarah and brought me flowers. Warriors sought my opinion on matters they once would have dismissed. I was becoming someone I'd never imagined I could be, not just a mate, but a leader. My belly grew, the pup inside me thriving under Dr. Rivera's care, and the abundance of good food and rest. Thorn was fascinated by the pregnancy, often pressing his hand to my stomach to feel the pup kick, his expression soft with wonder. They're strong, he'd murmur, his voice full of pride. Going to be a fighter, just like their mother. He never referred to the pup as anything but ours, never made any distinction between biological and chosen fatherhood. In his mind and heart, this pup was his, and that certainty made my love for him deepen every day. But peace, I was learning, was often temporary. 8 weeks after I'd been marked as Thorn's mate, a delegation from Crescent Falls arrived at Blackwood Territory, requesting an audience with the Alpha King. Thorn told me immediately, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Garrett is with them, he said, watching me carefully for my reaction. Along with Alpha Crane and several high-ranking pack members, they're claiming insult over your departure and demanding you be returned for judgment. My blood ran cold, old fear surging up, but the bond steadied me, Thorn's calm confidence flowing through our connection. What will you do? I asked, my hand moving protectively to my belly. His eyes flashed gold. I'll hear them out as is proper between allied packs. And then I'll make it very clear that you're mine, under my protection, and they have no claim on you whatsoever. The meeting was held in the Great Hall, with the Blackwood Council and highest-ranking wolves in attendance. I sat beside Thorn on the dais, my position as Luna clear to everyone present. When the Crescent Falls delegation entered, my eyes found Garrett immediately. He looked thinner than I remembered, shadows under his eyes, his expression haggard. But when his gaze landed on me, on Thorn's mark on my throat and my swollen belly, something ugly twisted in his face. Rage, jealousy, and beneath it, something that might have been regret, though it was too little and far too late. Alpha Crane stepped forward, a gray-haired wolf with shrewd eyes and a calculating expression. Alpha King, he said, bowing respectfully. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We've come regarding Sarah Whitlock, formerly of our pack. Thorn's hand found mine on the armrest, squeezing gently. Sarah Blackwood, he corrected, his voice cold. My mate and your Luna. She belongs to Blackwood now. Crane's eyes narrowed. She fled our pack while under mate bond to one of our wolves. That's a violation of pack law and an insult to our honor. We demand she be returned to face judgment for abandoning her post and her mate. I felt fury rise in my chest, but Thorn spoke before I could. She abandoned nothing, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made several of the Crescent Falls wolves step back. She fled an abusive situation where her mate was unfaithful and dishonored their bond. Or are you suggesting she should have stayed while your beta's son fucked your daughter behind her back? Shocked silence filled the hall. Garrett's face went white, then red, and Alpha Crane's expression twisted with barely suppressed anger. Those are serious accusations, Crane said tightly, Do you have proof? Thorn leaned forward, his presence filling the room, power radiating from him in waves that made the visiting wolves bare their throats instinctively. I have Sarah's testimony, which I believe absolutely, he said. And I have the evidence of a broken mate bond and a pregnant she-wolf who fled in terror rather than stay in your pack. But more than that, I have the right as Alpha King to accept any wolf into my pack who seeks sanctuary. Sarah came to me as a rogue. I claimed her as my true mate, and she now bears my mark. Your claim on her ended the moment I marked her. Garrett surged forward, his face contorted with emotion. She's carrying my pup, he shouted, pointing at my belly. That's my child. You have no right. Thorn's growl cut him off, a sound so feral and threatening that Marcus and Liam had to physically hold Garrett back from approaching the dais. That pup, Thorn said, his voice lethal, is mine. I claimed them when I claimed their mother. You lost any rights you might have had when you betrayed your mate and drove her from your pack pregnant and alone. You're fortunate I'm allowing you to leave here intact. I found my voice then, standing despite the weight of my belly, my hand still clasped in Thorn's. I don't want your judgment, I said to Crane, my voice ringing clear through the hall. I don't want your pack or your false sympathy. I found something here I never had in Crescent Falls. A mate who values me, a pack that welcomes me, and a future for my child that doesn't involve being a reminder of their father's shame. I'm staying here. This is my home now. Garrett's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw genuine anguish there. Sarah, please, he said, his voice breaking. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Come home. We can work this out. I looked at him. This wolf I'd once loved, who I'd thought was my forever, and felt nothing but pity. You didn't make a mistake, Garrett, I said quietly. You made a choice. Every time you went to her instead of me, every lie you told, every moment you let me believe we were solid while you were breaking us apart, those were choices. And I've made mine too. I choose Thorn. I choose Blackwood. I choose a life where I'm valued and loved and protected. I hope you and Amber are very happy together. The dismissal in my words was clear, and I saw him flinch as if I'd struck him. Alpha Crane's jaw tightened, but he recognized defeat when it was staring him in the face. Going against the Alpha King's claim would mean war, and Crescent Falls wasn't strong enough to challenge Blackwood. Very well, he said stiffly. We'll respect the Alpha King's claim, but this matter isn't forgotten. Thorn stood, his height and presence making Crane take an involuntary step back. See that it is, he said softly, dangerously. Because if I hear of any retaliation against Sarah, or any attempts to claim rights to her pup, I will consider it an act of war against Blackwood. And I promise you, Alpha Crane, you don't want to go to war with me. The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable, and Crane nodded jerkily before gesturing for his delegation to follow him out. Garrett lingered, his eyes on me, and I saw tears tracking down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. I hope you'll be happy. Then he turned and walked out, and I watched him go without regret or longing, only relief that this chapter of my life was finally closed. Thorn pulled me into his arms, mindful of my belly, and I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his scent, pine and snow and home. Are you all right? He murmured against my hair. I nodded, pulling back to look up at him. I'm perfect, I said truthfully, because I'm exactly where I belong. If you're loving Sarah's journey, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment so far, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories like this. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning with frost painting the windows silver, I went into labor. Thorn was beside me immediately, his hand gripping mine, his presence steadying even as pain racked my body. Dr. Rivera moved with calm efficiency, checking my progress and offering encouragement, while pack women I'd befriended surrounded me with support and love. The labor was long and difficult, hours blurring together in waves of agony and effort, but Thorn never left my side, never wavered, his voice constant in my ear telling me I was strong, I could do this, I was amazing. When the final push came and I felt the pup slide free, the relief was overwhelming. A sharp cry filled the room, indignant and powerful, and I collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down my face. "It's a girl," Dr. Rivera announced, smiling broadly as she cleaned and wrapped the pup in a soft blanket. "A beautiful, healthy girl." She placed my daughter in my arms, and I looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair already thick on her small head. The eyes that would likely lighten to gold or green as she grew. She was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thorn leaned over, his hand gentle on our daughter's head, his expression full of wonder. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Just like her mother." I looked up at him. This wolf who'd saved me, who'd given me everything when I'd had nothing, and saw tears tracking down his face. "Do you want to hold her?" I asked softly. He nodded, and I carefully transferred our daughter into his large hands, watching as he cradled her with infinite care. She blinked up at him, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger, and something passed between them: recognition, acceptance, love. "Hello, little one," Thorn murmured, his voice tender. "I'm your father. And I promise you, you'll never doubt that you're loved, never question your worth, never feel like you're not enough. You're my daughter, my heir, and I will move mountains to keep you safe." Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks at his words, at the absoluteness of his claim on her. He meant every word. She was his, just as I was his, and nothing would ever change that. "What should we name her?" I asked, watching him rock her gently. He looked at me, his gold eyes bright. "You choose," he said. "You carried her, protected her, brought her into this world. Her name should come from you." I thought for a moment, then smiled. "Luna," I said softly. "I want to name her Luna, because she's our moon, our light, the brightest thing in our lives." Thorn's expression softened impossibly further. "Luna Blackwood," he said, testing the name. "Perfect. Just perfect." He bent and pressed a kiss to her tiny forehead, then to my lips, gentle and sweet. "Thank you," he whispered against my mouth. "For her, for choosing me, for giving me a family I never thought I'd have." I cupped his face with one hand, my other arm wrapped around Luna where she nestled against my chest. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, "for finding me when I was lost, for loving me when I couldn't love myself, for being the father my daughter deserves." We stayed like that, the three of us wrapped in each other, as the autumn sun rose higher and painted the room in gold. Outside, the pack howled their celebration, welcoming their new princess into the world. Inside, we were complete. A family born not from blood or obligation, but from choice and fate, and a love that had healed every wound I'd carried. Luna grew quickly, thriving under the attention of an entire pack who adored her. She had my dark hair and Thorn's gold eyes, a combination that was striking even in infancy. She was bold and curious, already reaching for everything she could grab, her laugh a sound that filled the pack. House with joy. Thorn doted on her shamelessly, often found in his office during meetings with her sleeping against his chest in a sling, or on the training grounds teaching her, at barely 6 months old, about pack dynamics while she gurgled happily. No one who saw them together could doubt that she was his daughter in every way that mattered. I settled into my role as Luna with increasing confidence, working alongside Thorn to manage pack affairs, mediating disputes, and supporting pack members in need. The females who'd been wary of me at first became my closest friends, teaching me the intricacies of pack politics and helping me navigate my new position. The males respected me for my fierce protectiveness of Luna and my unwavering support of Thorn's decisions. Children sought me out for stories and comfort, and I found myself becoming the mother figure not just to my daughter, but to the entire younger generation. One evening, when Luna was 8 months old, Thorn found me in the nursery, rocking her to sleep and singing softly. He leaned against the doorframe, watching with that soft expression he got when he looked at us, and I felt warmth bloom in my chest. "What are you thinking?" I asked quietly, not wanting to wake Luna. He pushed off the doorframe and crossed to us, settling on the floor beside the rocking chair, his hand coming to rest on my knee. "I'm thinking about how close I came to never having this," he said, his voice low. "If I'd been an hour later getting to that diner, if I'd decided not to stop for coffee, if you'd already moved on, I would have missed you, missed her, missed everything that makes my life worth living now." I reached down with my free hand to run my fingers through his hair, and he leaned into the touch like a wolf seeking comfort. "But you didn't miss me," I said softly. "The goddess's timing was perfect. You found me exactly when I needed to be found, when I was ready to accept what you were offering." He turned his head to press a kiss to my palm. "I love you," he said, the words still carrying weight even though he said them a dozen times a day now. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes, the thought of anything happening to you or Luna." His voice broke, and I slid from the rocking chair to the floor beside him, careful not to jostle Luna, and leaned into his side. "Nothing's going to happen to us," I promised. "You've made us the safest wolves in the territory. We're protected, loved, and surrounded by pack. We're okay, Thorn. We're more than okay. We're happy." He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me closer, and we sat there on the nursery floor with our sleeping daughter between us. A perfect moment of peace. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed. "I'd resigned myself to ruling alone, dying alone, my line ending with me. And then, you walked into my life, broken and brave and carrying another wolf's pup, and you gave me everything I'd stopped hoping for." I tilted my face up to kiss him, soft and lingering. "You saved me," I said against his lips, "in every way a person can be saved. I was drowning, and you pulled me out and taught me how to breathe again." We stayed there until Luna woke, hungry and demanding, and Thorn carried her to me while I settled into the rocking chair to feed her. He sat beside us, his hand resting on my shoulder, watching with that expression of wonder that never quite faded. This was our life now, simple moments of connection and care, building a family and a future from the ashes of what I'd fled. Garrett and Amber had their lives in Crescent Falls, and I had mine here with Thorn and Luna, and the pack that had become my true home. I'd traded a false bond for a true one, a wolf who'd betrayed me for one who would die to protect me, and I'd never once regretted the choice. Years passed in a blur of happiness and growth. Luna grew into a confident, fierce little girl with her father's leadership qualities and my compassion. At 3, she was already showing signs of a dominant wolf, her eyes flashing gold when she was excited or angry, her possessiveness over her toys and territory, making Thorn laugh with pride. "That's my girl," he'd say, watching her boss around the other pups. "Going to be a hell of an alpha one day." I'd swat his arm playfully and remind him she was still just a baby, but privately I agreed. Luna was special, marked by fate and raised by wolves who loved her unconditionally. When Luna was 4, Thorn and I stood before the pack again, this time to announce that I was pregnant with our second pup, a child who would carry both our blood, a symbol of the bond that had saved us both. The pack's celebration was even more enthusiastic than it had been for Luna's birth, howls echoing across the territory for hours. Luna was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big sister, already planning all the things she'd teach the new pup, her excitement infectious. This pregnancy was easier than the first, my body healthier and my mind at peace. Thorn was somehow even more attentive than he'd been with Luna, hovering constantly and driving me to exasperated fondness. "I'm not made of glass," I'd tell him when he tried to carry me upstairs. I was perfectly capable of climbing. "You're carrying my pup," he'd respond, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. We were building something together now, a family that was wholly ours, and his protectiveness was just another expression of his love. On a spring morning when the world was bursting into bloom, I gave birth to a son, healthy and strong, with Thorn's black hair and my green eyes. We named him Ash, after the trees that surrounded the territory, and he completed our family in a way that felt inevitable and right. Luna adored him immediately, spending hours sitting beside his bassinet and telling him stories about the pack, her small hand protective on his blanket. Watching her with him, seeing the fierce love already growing between them, I felt something settle deep in my soul. This was what I'd run toward when I'd fled Crescent Falls. This love, this family, this life that was fuller and richer than anything I'd imagined possible. One night, when Ash was a month old and Luna was asleep in her room, Thorn and I stood on our balcony overlooking the territory. His arm was around my waist, my head resting on his shoulder, and the moon hung full and bright above us, bathing everything in silver light. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly. "Taking in a broken Omega and her fatherless pup? You could have had any she-wolf in the territory as your mate." He turned to face me, his hands framing my face, his eyes intense. "I could have had 1,000 she-wolves," he said, "but none of them would have been you. None of them would have given me Luna or Ash or this life we've built. You weren't broken, Sarah. You were breaking free, and I'm grateful every day that you ran toward me instead of away from everything." I kissed him then, deep and passionate, and full of all the love I couldn't put into words. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "My mate, my Luna, my everything." Tears pricked my eyes, happy tears this time, and I smiled. "I love you too," I said. "My alpha, my savior, my home." And standing there under the mating moon with my true mate's arms around me and our children sleeping safe inside, I knew I'd finally found where I belonged, not in the pack I was born to, but in the one I'd chosen. Not with the wolf who'd marked me first, but with the one who'd been destined for me all along. I'd been pregnant by my cheating mate when I fled, but the Alpha King had found me first. And that made all the difference. The story of the broken Omega who became a Luna spread through the supernatural community, a tale told to young wolves about second chances and true mates. Some said it was romantic, others called it destiny. But I knew the truth. It was a choice. My choice to run, to survive, to hope. Thorn's choice to claim me, protect me, love me. Our choice to build a family and a life that honored the bond between us. And every day I chose him again, just as he chose me. Because that's what true mates do. They choose each other, over and over, through every hardship and every joy, until the end of their days. And I would choose Thorn Blackwood every single time, for as long as the moon hung in the sky and my heart beat in my chest, he was my forever, and I was finally, completely his.